Just acknowledge what comes up and have compassion for it without immediately jumping to conclusions. Because at the end of the day, it's always when we're trying to escape the present moment because something doesn't feel like we can't accept it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. That's why we strive to chase so many things. There's a deep ache in our heart that makes us unable to accept the moment as it is. And earlier I was like, should I bring my camera? I was like,
Nice.
See, I like to record conversations like these because it's like, it's not very common you get to have them with many people in general. But I think that's what it's like, having these is makes you realize what's important in life and what's not. Because the ironic thing is that what most people think about as important in life isn't important, and the things they regard as unimportant are actually what's important.
Right. I feel like my job, it is important, obviously, for surviving, but
Right.
I forgot what's most important, which is, for me, I think it's my parents so far.
Mm-hmm.
Myself, obviously, my dreams. I lost focus. There's so many distractions, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But I think when you come back to it, when you always come back to it, you recognize there were only ever distractions. Nothing ever can take you away from your dreams and your true sense of purpose. Things can only distract you from it.
Right.
And when you're distracted, you feel like, when I start making this much money, when I finally make it here, get this degree, when I finally this. But that's the distraction, I think. That's the illusion. Like, your dreams and your purpose and what you want is never separate from you. It's your belief that it's separate that creates, when you see through the distractions, you realize they were just excuses to stop you from it because you're afraid. You're afraid of what you really want out of life. And so it's easier to just push it away. And that can justify why you don't have it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you can justify to yourself why you shouldn't have it, then you can give yourself an excuse to not have it and to not blame yourself for not having it. Because then you can just blame on the circumstances, you know? You can blame it on the people. Like, not taking ownership of the fact that you could be where you want to be.
Right.
And it's so like ironic and paradoxical, right? Because it's like I said about not believing in your 3D reality.
Right.
So it's like, people might call you delusional for this, but like when I've learned to lean into this, I've never been more fulfilled and happy. Was when I lean into this feeling of the opposite of paranoia. So like pronoia, where in paranoia you're worried and anxiety about things that might happen, that haven't happened but might, because you're worrying about, you're anticipating the worst.
Right.
But pronoia is like anticipating the best. It's like what, even though it hasn't happened, I fully expect it to happen, and I'm not
actual like word, pronoia.
I'm not sure. It might be. And I'm not in desperation I'm not desperately trying to seek it, because the moment I'm in desperation trying to seek that thing, that means I don't have it. That means I'm separate from it, right? And that's called being distracted by your 3D reality.
Right.
Which obviously, when you say that to a non-spiritually understanding person, it's like the only thing real is 3D reality. They have all different terms for it: 4D reality, whatever, spiritual reality, all of that. When you start to see let's call it your inner vision, your innermost vision, your deepest dreams, when you start to see that as not separate from your 3D reality right now, then you're already living the life you want to live, and it's only a matter of whether or not you become distracted by what's happening around you, because you realize you are not this separate ego entity in a world where things happen to you, but rather you create what happens to you. And
right.
I don't know
it's
if that
your
sounds
life,
woo-woo.
Right? I feel like too many times I use other people as my excuse not to do something.
Right. That's so common, right? People do that with their diet, with their exercise, with starting their own business, with like all of it, right? I do it too, but it's just about catching yourself, right?
Yeah.
And when you catch yourself, it's like, you sneaky motherfucker, you know? you stop identifying with the false version of you that feels held back by whatever that thing is, and you start to see your truth, and you start to embody it. You gotta turn right soon.
A lot of times, like after these talks, I realized like let's say like I said that the important thing right now is my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I make an active, like right now I'm trying to make an active effort to plan with them, spend some more time with them,
Mm-hmm.
see how I can be more affectionate with them. But like after you leave, after like we're done hanging out, I don't know, maybe it's the chemical imbalance in my head or some shit, but like
You feel like you'll just go back to
I just go back to how I was before we talked.
right. I know exactly what you mean by that, because I've felt that kind of feeling countless times, right? I've had this spiritual high and it feels fucking awesome. But sooner or later you come down, and then it seems like you come back to this, like how
It's
everything was.
Yeah, it's
right?
like, oh, why do I do this? How do I do this?
Right.
There's so many different factors. Like, there's no point in doing this. I feel like we need to find a way to, well, I don't know if you found a way, but I need to find a way to, like, get through that. Like, really stick with my thoughts and put them into, like, action. Like the thoughts of these talks, I want them to stick in my head. And then, you know.
Okay. I'm going to tell you what's counterintuitive.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can try to stick these thoughts in your head all you want, but that's clinging. So all these ideas are like rooted in Buddhism and all of that, right? How do you escape suffering? And basically what the Buddha says is suffering happens because of the clinging of the mind. So we're going back to talking about like religion again. It becomes dogma. Don't turn wisdom into dogma. As soon as like knowledge or wisdom, you try to turn it into dogma, when you feel like you're falling short of the dogma that you've set for yourself, then you feel like, in Christianity, you feel like you're sinning, right? You feel like something's not, you beat yourself up for not aligning to that, that like spiritual feeling. But I would say, when you feel like you're coming down, like, just lean into the feeling. Keep inquiring. Be curious about, like, observing that feeling. But don't try to judge it, or don't try to turn it back into that spiritual feeling. Because the moment you try to turn that feeling back into that spiritual high feeling, that's what causes you more suffering. It's just like say for example, the rat race, or a poor man trying to be rich. If all your efforts are focused on trying to get rich, that means you're poor.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you're already rich, then you have no desire to want to chase wealth, because it's already a part of you. And so it's the same, you see the same parallel here? If you can be okay with yourself as you are in whatever moment, and just acknowledge what comes up and have compassion for it, without immediately jumping to conclusions about who you ought to be and who you ought not to be, then in that you can find that sense of like peace again. Because at the end of the day, it's always when we're trying to escape the present moment, because something doesn't feel like we can't accept it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. That's why we strive to chase so many things, whether that's relationships, girls, sex, money, careers, degrees, alcohol, cocaine, right? There's a deep ache in our heart that makes us unable to accept the moment as it is, and so we find our own way, right? Drugs, sex, money, career, degree, like it could be anything. We try to find a way to distract ourselves from the uncomfortable feeling of not accepting us as we are in this present reality, in this moment.
Right.
Because we feel like we're not good enough, circumstances are good enough, we're not living the life that we want. But then that's the distraction, right? That's the illusion you have to see through. So it goes back to the pronoia thing. And yeah, observe without trying to change anything.
Right.
Because wherever you suffer is your greatest teacher. It's telling you something because if something can hold down your mental state, then it's telling you, oh, I'm holdable, downable in this spot. Like, why is that? But the most important thing is that you have a center that roots you, and you can always come back to that center where you can just see all things as they are. Obviously, like, there will be life will take you, and it'll grab you, and it'll distract you. But the most important thing is that you keep coming back, and as you get more self-aware, you can reside in that state more and more often.
That's another thing. Like, how we observe a lot. For me, when I observe, I also judge a lot.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's a horrible thing, dude. I just want to observe without judging. But it's
not a horrible thing. So one of the things I did for a long time too was that when you start getting say quote unquote spiritual, you try to observe and you try to not judge.
Yeah,
right?
I don't want to feel like I'm better than a person, right?
Right. But when you are trying not to judge, you are judging yourself for judging. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So now you're in a bigger inception of a whole, where this is your ego's effort, by the way, of you're trying to be like, oh, I'm spiritual, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm not judging people, and so now.
Oh, you're right.
So now I'm judging myself when I judge people, and then I can say to other people, you shouldn't judge other people. I don't judge other people, right? It can become a very dangerous spiritual trap. It's just like what we were talking about earlier. If you witness yourself judging people, then just let yourself judge. Just observe yourself judging it without being identified with the person who's judging. Right? So you don't need to judge yourself for judging. Judging is as natural as the sky being blue or the rain pouring down whenever the fuck it wants to.
Right. It is.
So it's part of that acceptance of whatever is, right?
I guess it's your subconscious and conscious. Just pumping thoughts into your head. Huh? But see, I feel like the world, the way the world is set up with all these fucking prestigious schools, statuses, titles, net worth, it just it creates such a status quo that there will never be equality. If there's no sure there's racism right now, but if there was no racism, there would still be inequality.
There
everywhere.
never will be equality. There is no equality in nature whatsoever. Think about it, right? You know about the Pareto principle, right?
No, I don't.
20% of stars hold 80% of all of the stars' masses. 20% of the world's cities host 80% of the world's population. 20% of people are responsible for 80% of the total productivity.
Right.
So it's the minority produces the majority. That kind of that's the principle, right? Like, even nature, that's a natural law. It's like, basically nothing is equal. Equality is a man-made concept. Like, do you ever see a tree grow exactly the same as another tree? Do you ever see a snowflake that's identical to the other one, right? The universe is all about variation and variety because it's abundant. It comes in, the universe is infinite, right? It expresses its infiniteness through its you and me and him and her and Z and Zay.
No, I just had a thought.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know how I said, like, there will always be some sort of inequality?
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, in my head, I feel like racism and, like, LGBT discrimination, homophobia, like, I feel like it's just, in a way, I think it's controlled by the government. Because if you remove racism and, like, all this, like,
Right.
or, like, fucking LGBT discrimination, what do they have? It would be the lower class complaining and fighting against the higher class, which is, like, the politicians, the fucking 1%.
That was how communism happened. It was the lower class fighting against the upper class. Now it's the same parallel, except now it's about race and gender fighting.
Right. I feel like, in a way, it's controlled.
But you're right.
They're like, oh, South and the fucking...
The narrative is manufactured by a group of people who have this idea has become their belief system. Do you see it?
Yeah.
It's become their religion.
It's like they pump it out so much. They want people to think that racism is such a huge problem.
Exactly.
That color is such a big factor in
Exactly.
everything.
When you put emphasis on the first thing you put emphasis on is color, then all you're going to see is racism.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're distracting from... I feel like they're distracting masses from what's really fucking the issue.
Right.
Perhaps it's not even like the fucking wage gap or like the inequality.
So
maybe it's something bigger.
That's the ironic thing. If you want racism to disappear, you stop talking about race.
Exactly, bro.
Right? There is no difference between us unless you're focused on the color of your skin, which is so ironic, right?
Like, you have all these fucking programs that are like, oh, we support African Americans, and then you leave out the rest, the other minorities.
Right.
Like,
Is
oh,
that
wow.
not racism?
It is. It's preferential racism, right?
Well, that's what racism is, right? But it's becomes so contorted and so like that.
See, like, if you
that
have,
reverse racism is now anti-racism.
if you have a scholarship for like Mexicans, like illegal immigrants from Mexico, but it's strictly for illegal immigrants from Mexico, and then you have like some fucking Asian kid who's like grinded his entire life but can't get like citizenship for shit, and you put them side by side, the Asians can be like, wow, this Mexican dude hasn't done shit, but he's getting everything.
That's a Marxist idea, man.
Like, these
That's
fucking,
based in socialism and Marxism.
it just doesn't make sense, bro. Like, I feel like the programs that are aimed to destroy racism are the ones creating
it. Right. And you're basically telling the Mexican kids and the minorities that, oh, you're dumber than the Asian kids. So here, we're going to artificially boost up your baseline so that you can be dumber to make up for your dumbness, and you can still be the same as them.
Yeah, and
It's
like when they do that, it's also like, oh, they target the low fucking income people too.
Right.
Like, oh, you've been through more struggles,
Exactly.
which they probably have. But like, in a way, when you like root that like fucking idea into their head,
Exactly.
it's like it ingrains it into their personality.
Exactly, and it's these elites that think these people are stupid, right? Because they're basically saying to them, "You're stupid, but we'll help you.
We'll lift you up, but you better support us."
If you have brains as a minority, you can see that that's like an insult, right?
It is.
It's like saying, "Oh, you poor little thing. Oh, you can't reach the candy up here. Here, let me." Like, it's insulting. So it's pretty ironic how backwards we are, that in the name of certain things we do the opposite.
Dude, politics is a big fucking chess game.
Yeah.
And this fucking government is...
The art of rhetoric. Right, well, that's the thing. I used to be so attached. It's like 2 years ago, I was very attached in the whole, like, this world and its politics and its social problems and all of that. But getting attached to it is, well, in a sense, it's what creates all the problems. Because when you become attached to it, you become attached to one side.
Right.
Say now you're blue, okay? So if you get attached to it, you can get attached to either one of two sides. You're either gonna get attached to the blue side or the red side. And what happens when there's red and there's blue? Right?
Yeah, it's
conflict, wars. And the ultimate diversity is when you can accept that people have different ideas than you, have different skin color than you, have different genders than you, have different cultural habits than you, and yet at the same time you're able to realize that underneath we're all still the fucking same.
Yeah.
Underneath the surface is the distraction of what's different, but underneath we're all of the same substance, the soul, the spirit, the whatever the fuck.
But dude, getting people to become cohesive is...
Like when I dropped politics and all that bullshit altogether, like, oh my god, like life had never felt so peaceful and so much better.
Right.
And I think people need to wake up to that. When you start doing that, then good deeds start coming out of you naturally. Like, you actually want to do good for other people, and like small acts of kindness becomes just something you naturally do.
Well,
instead of worrying about, this side and that side, and blah, blah, blah.
It's that sense of altruism, right? I feel like that's what shrooms gives you. The sense of altruism, acceptance.
Well, yeah, you lose your ego, right? You lose your sense of self with shrooms.
Yeah. It does suck though, man. Like every time I go out, it's so hard to find someone I could talk to, like, deeply, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you went left. Yeah, man, like... Well, I hope COVID was I can't.
COVID was horrible, bro.
COVID?
No gain, no growth.
Seriously?
For me, at least. Because all I do is stay home and fucking play games.
I don't know. I thought COVID was one of the best spiritual, like... Well, that's the thing, though. When circumstances like this happen, one of two things happen. You can see it. You can go into a spiritual crisis, or you can use the suffering and raise you up. Because I know, like, a lot of people have taken COVID and used it as an I'm going to call it an excuse, right? But obviously a lot of times it's not as simple as that, but use it as a way to justify more suffering in their life. But you can take that and you can learn something from it.
Right.
Even though obviously it's easier said than done, but these epiphanies, they come to you when you step out of being the one who suffers. So, yeah. It's nice that I can catch this, because I enjoy having conversations like these.
Hell yeah, dude. For a long drive, too.
Yeah. I'm going to end the video here.
What?
I'm just going to turn to video, bro.
Yeah.
You okay with that? Some of the stuff we say might be out of your comfort zone for controversialness, right? I don't know.
No, that's good. Yeah, you could stop if you want.